So you're looking for that new magical retirement number? Well, it's 1.7 million is what you're going to need to retire according to some surveys. But is this the number for you? We're going to dig deep into that. We're also going to take a look at China reopening, what that means to you and your portfolio, as well as taking a look at the 4-day work week. I'm Trevor from Cherry Hill Private Wealth. Hope you enjoy. So China reopening should be good for the economy, right? Fixing a lot of these supply chain issues that we've been having. But with them possibly supplying Russia with lethal aid and the US sanctions already imposed, investments likely staying in China, is the economy really getting the help to fight off this global recession? Or is it just more uncertainty? China recently announced that they were finally abandoning their zero COVID policy, which has left the country cycling between production and complete lockdowns. Goldman Sachs has increased their expectations for China's GDP growth to 6.5%. And sees a strong potential of having international ripples, including oil prices being boosted, which would benefit exporters such as Canada. Of course, strong growth is what many governments around the world are trying to avoid as they continue to raise interest rates and try to slow inflation. A lot's changed in the world stage since China implemented its zero COVID policy, and tensions between China and the US has only picked up. Rewinding back to 2018 when Donald Trump initiated a trade war with China to try and attempt to rebalance the economic relationship between the two countries, this became more and more pronounced throughout the past 5 years. In October 2022, Joe Biden rolled out sweeping export controls to prevent China from gaining access to cutting-edge semiconductors and AI capabilities. We're now seeing 90% of Apple's Chinese suppliers pivoting out of China and investing heavily in Vietnam. Bloomberg estimates that it could take up to 8 years to move just 10% of its production out of China. So even though this might be happening right now, it could take a long time for it to actually transpire. This has led to China's National People's Congress rolling out plans for a deepening structural reform. 2022 was a tough year for China, with growth being the second worst level since 1976 at only 3%, a very stark difference from 2021 when it was 8%. Even with all the uncertainty around China, there's still a lot to be optimistic about. As they move from reopening to recovery, Goldman Sachs anticipates the MSCI China Index rising as much as 24% higher by the end of the year. From its peak in February 2021, the index has been on a consistent slide, losing 48%. As anticipation of having the zero COVID restriction lifted back in October, the index has risen by more than 40%. We've also now seen a correction from the January high to a 10% pullback, and then some gains since then. A lot of the growth is anticipated to be in the second and third quarters going forward, and Goldman Sachs says this should be around that 9 to 7% over that period of time. China is also relying very heavily on consumer spending increases inside China, but so far that hasn't transpired. And this is really why the People's Bank of China is focusing its support on domestic demand, an expansion there, as well as stabilizing the economic growth and prices. Right now, Chinese households have accumulated 2.6 trillion in fresh savings last year alone. But unfortunately, less than 30% of all that is available to spend right now, as the rest is socked away in long-term savings accounts. So, it kind of goes back to, should we be putting money in GICs? Sometimes it's a good idea, but also it really limits what we can do when opportunities arise. They're also fighting against a weak job market, and a bit of a real estate crisis is happening there right now. Where China will be able to spend is going to be difficult since there's a large government debt, along with the many infrastructure projects have already really been completed. On the other side, Canadian-Chinese trade hit all-time highs back in 2022, and Canada surpassed the import record of over 100 billion for the first time. Consumers' goods topped the imports at over 31 billion, and we also export a historic high of almost 28 billion. With China reopening, we see that number increase in 2023 as oil exports rise. So have you saved that 1.7 million that most Canadians believe is going to be needed to retire? If not, do you have a plan to move back with your children? Hopefully you've got a really good relationship with them. The head of wealth distribution at one of the major banks says that she feels 1.7 is a little bit high, but I would say from where I sit that I have no idea what you need to retire. It is, however, one of the questions that we get more than any other, bar none, on the financial planning side. What's my retirement number? What's the number I need? What are other people like me doing? Everyone wants a really nice, easy answer based on what others are doing, but it's just a little bit more personal than that. In Canada, we've got several different vehicles and how we can save to get to that number, and each of them are treated very differently with how they are taxed initially, as they grow, and then again upon withdrawal. So if you're saving solely in RSPs or through work savings, You'll need a lot more money saved as you're taxed as income as you start removing the money to fund your retirement. On the other side, if you're using a TFSA, a non-registered account, or a corporate investment account, you're likely to be able to save a lot less as the taxation will be reduced or eliminated altogether. And as boring as it is, the only way to really get your numbers is to build out a financial roadmap. I would suggest either building out a cash flow statement of what you're currently doing and then adjust your expenses as you anticipate your life changing. So, if you want to get that fancy golf membership or you're going to be traveling more in retirement, maybe you're going to downside. We start taking that into effect as we start looking. There's some really good online tools. But, usually the best way is to enlist a certified financial planner to help you build out that plan. The survey also found that 44% of Canadians were confident that they're going to have enough to retire, which is really down by about 10% from 2020. If you're one of the 56% that isn't confident that you're going to be able to retire, or the 53% that have no idea what you're aiming for, there are tools and professionals there that can help you with that. So we getting rid of Monday or we getting rid of Friday? Because the largest trial ever for the 4-day work week found that most UK companies participating in it are not returned to the 5-day standard, and a third already making that change permanent. So, the study really involved 61 organizations and almost 3,000 workers who voluntarily adopted shorter work weeks from June to December of 2022. And only 3 organizations decided to pause that experiment, and 2 are still considering shorter hours or how they're going to work around that. The rest were convinced by revenue gains, drops in turnover, and lower levels of burnout. And they've really made that that 4 is the new 5 when it comes to the work week. The fresh results help make the business case for the 4-day work week, and organizational revenues were up 35% from a year earlier and rose by 1.4% during that trial. Employee absenteeism dropped from 2 days a month to 0.7, while turnover fell by more than a half. Although the small sample size and broader labor market dynamics can make it really difficult to isolate the trial effect. Companies rated the overall experience as an 8.3 out of 10, which is higher than most of the movies and TV shows I watch get on their ratings. After the pandemic, flexibility around work-life balance became essential for most companies to win and keep workers in the tight labor market. Now, some see that 4-day work week as a new weapon to battle for the talent. Women in particular benefit from the extra day off, while both genders reported better outcomes. Females experience greater boosts around the life and job satisfaction. So it's also shifted household dynamics as men reported they took on more childcare and housework. So it really seems like things are changing. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you like it, make sure to subscribe. If you want to hear just an audio version, check out our podcast. Aaron's doing that. We've got Adrian doing the blog. So you can consume this kind of material in whichever way suits you best. I hope to see you again in a couple weeks. Take care.